name is Dr. Marc Fell. I'm a senior performance nutritionist at Science and Sport, and alongside that role, I'm also a scientific officer at Science and Sport. And really, that means for me, and my sort of day-to-day role is I'll work as embedded performance nutritionist within our different elite partnerships we have through Science and Sport with a range of different organizations, different athletes, and so on. I've been in this role now coming up till 3 years, and I've sort of had experience then working across a range of different athletes, sports. So spent a considerable amount of time working with professional endurance cyclists. Now moved towards providing support for track-based cyclists as part of the Science and Sport partnership. And then also just provided general nutrition support also to a range of different endurance runners, as well as part of the Science and Sport brand, where we have a range of different ambassadors and athletes who sort of will undertake different distances in running, from anywhere from middle distance up till marathon and ultra endurance, for instance. And then alongside my role as a performance nutritionist, I'm also a scientific officer within Science and Sport, which means I'll sort of assist and collaborate and organize some of the different ongoing research projects we have through different universities. And that is really, these research questions are all sort of derived from what we're seeing from elite organizations, elite athletes, what insights we're getting through discussions with a whole host of different athletes as well. And then also prior to me beginning my role at Science and Sport, I spent a considerable number of years working in World Tour cycling. So again, a really keen area where I think, I'm sure like we'll discuss today, around where hydration at times is probably not at the forefront in comparison to other aspects of fueling. And again, I've also had different experiences in endurance sports with track and field athletes, middle distance runners, marathon runners, Olympic and amateur as well.
Excellent. Nice to meet you, Marc. So I'll introduce myself. So I'm Dr. Roel Mingels, and I'm the head of R&D at FLOWBIO. So my background is in biosensors and biosensing technologies, with a PhD in the field of implantable biosensors. I joined FLOWBIO about 4 years ago now, and was responsible for the development of the sensor system from when it was just a concept all the way up to our current device, which has now been mass manufactured. So my expertise ranges from obviously the sensor tech in different areas, as I mentioned, implantable medical devices, but also environmental monitoring, and now of course wearable sweat sensors. At FLOWBIO, I also lead a lot of the development on the data analysis, so the algorithms that we use, and also work with the scientific community, because obviously science is at the core of what we do, what we all do, and it's part of the educational process as well to ensure that what the device does is of value to the user and also to the scientific community. As you're probably well aware, and as we'll probably touch on, some of the techniques used in physiological research is in some ways a bit outdated and not very practical when it comes to real world and in-field settings. That's obviously why we came up with this wearable device, which can hopefully take some of that those difficulties out of the equation and help you actually gain valuable insights as you're working in real-time settings. That's me.
Yeah, thanks, Roland. Yeah, that's super insightful. And I think, now probably more so than ever, we see so many advancements in technology within sport. And now, I suppose, every week there's a new device, a new sensor, or something new being developed, which is obviously for us as scientists is amazing, but also can be complicated as well. So I think it would be great if you'd be able to, I suppose, explain actually what the FLOWBIO sensor actually is.
Yeah, sure. So we created a wearable device that essentially replaces the lab standards for fluid loss and for electrolyte loss through sweat. So obviously, as you exercise, your body tries to dissipate the heat through sweating, and that is associated with losses of electrolytes and water. Now, the gold standard has always been to use, the weigh in, weigh out process, and things like the Tegaderm absorbent patch and flame photometry to actually take the measurements of that. But they're very point-based, and they don't give you these insights that you require, let alone that they're not really portable systems at all. And I don't know if you're obviously a nutritionist and physiologist, so you might have had some experience with the Tegaderm patches. They're also super tedious to use and really impractical when it comes to outdoor settings and especially long rides. So we decided to put all of that and create a device that can do this in real time and throughout your ride, so that you can take it with you and sort of have that lab-based accuracy as you exercise every day. And so the way we did that is we created a device which captures the sweat from your skin. So using like what's called microfluidic structures, so very small volume fluidics, and passes that over our sensors. We also have a skin temperature sensor because, as I mentioned, we obviously, try to tell you based on your heat dissipation how your body is responding. So therefore, we have skin temperature sensor as well, and we look at the ambient conditions, and we combine all of that to give you estimates of your whole body fluid losses through sweat, and then also assess what's in your sweat. So obviously electrolytes within the sweat, sodium, potassium, we can distinguish those and then tell you what you've lost during your ride and also how you should replace them to hopefully perform better and recover optimally.
Yeah, and I think, from what you're saying, I think what is a really unique perspective from this device seems to be just the practicality of it. And obviously from my experience working with a range of athletes from amateur right up till elites, at times trying to ensure we're getting appropriate buy-in with certain technology or devices that we want to either explore the use of or what we want to routinely use. I think one of the key components is just making sure it's practical for the athlete. They can start using this device without having to necessarily have to use something that's super complicated or takes a lot of time to set up or apply, or there is the downfall with certain ones where it can be quite invasive as well. So with the FLOWBIO, is it just a wearable sensor?
Yes, it's a wearable device, but we've taken really into account the practical situations. So you touched on some of them, but obviously the ease of use is of key importance. So what we did was actually design it in such a way that's compatible with common heart rate straps. So they can be either the arm-based ones with optical, or you can use it on the chest strap. The idea being that the athletes typically are already familiar with wearing those types of components for their training, and we just fit onto that. The other thing that really sets our system apart, and it has really driven our development actually, is the fact that people don't like to have to think about, like I need to bring an additional piece, I need to put on a sticker, for example, press start, and then do my ride. That always is an additional faff. And we actually started off in the very early days with that as the original concept, but it became very apparent that this additional sort of just carrying two extra bits and pieces led to people forgetting about it or not using it, and also it's very impractical. Obviously it's not very sustainable as well if each time you need to throw away a patch. So we decided to actually take all our knowledge and combine that into a reusable system that is user-friendly. Obviously, we've had to make sure that everything is rigid and lasts and is, doesn't have things like biofouling from the sweat, and doesn't have sensor drift, and is obviously, like also robust enough to survive, being dropped from a bike or things like that. But with that in mind, we managed to provide a system that can just live on your heart rate strap. And therefore you end up, not having to think about it. You just leave it on. And the next time you do your ride, you just do the standard thing like you've always done, pop on your heart rate monitor and get also your sweat data. And that has really changed everything in the way we handle it. Also, our app obviously facilitates that. So it takes all that data and then builds your personalized profile. So it looks at how your session is different to the previous one, and also, tries to help you prepare for upcoming events. For example, if you know that you're training in certain hot environments, humid environments, going for long rides, because as you're well aware, it's really, especially when you're training, there's no hydration stations along the way. You'll have to, prep your bottles, bring everything with you, make sure that you have enough. And, obviously if the weather changes, then, that can be detrimental to your performance or just how you feel afterwards. And we sort of take that guesswork out for you and stay up to date with your actual profile as you train. And that's been super beneficial. And it's interesting that you touched on the fact that you want you want to have something that's scientifically sound. I touched on it briefly before, but obviously that is at the core of what we've always tried to do, and I've really tried to drive that as well within our company, because as you mentioned, there's so many wearables out there, and it is very difficult these days, even not just in wearable sports tech, but anywhere really, to find something you get out of the box and it does exactly what it does.
Yeah.
It can be challenging. And so for me, it's been a huge drive to actually make sure that it does what it says. So, that meant a lot of rigorous testing in-house. We have our own performance lab here, where we had people come through, test every sort of condition. Then we also went external, like testing in the field, testing with external validation partners, to really make sure that it does what it does. And when we, sort of say like, this is our accuracy, that is what it is. Like, we know it's going to be that. Obviously you have outliers, science is statistics, right? And you are trying to model something from a very like local value to, whole body responses, which is a challenge. But it does its job really well, and I think we can be quite proud as a team that that's a useful tool also to the physiologists, at least the ones that we work with around the world.
Yeah, and I think especially that just gives so much confidence to both practitioners, whether it's nutritionists, physiologists, coaches, whoever it may be, but also I think even more so now till the athletes. Like I'm sure we're all aware, athletes, there's so much information out there, education and knowledge. There's athletes are getting smarter as well in relation to sports science, sport nutrition, and so on, and being able to have that real robust and scientific backing behind a device, I suppose in a way gives confidence to the practitioner in terms of they're actually seeing data that's relevant and representative of the individual, and then also gives confidence to the athlete to then be able to believe and value the interventions that'll then be based off the back of whatever data is being collected within this, to I suppose inform more bespoke and specific hydration strategies. And I think this is quite a funny story, probably, that from my experience when I've sort of assessed hydration status with elite athletes, and specifically around sweat testing per se. So like you'd mentioned before, around the practicalities and difficulties of times whenever we're using sweat patches, which at times can be in a way maybe a bit of a nuisance with athletes. So I was doing some sweat testing with this was with cyclists, and we were they probably train in quite remote places in terms of trying to get to mountain ranges and so on. So we were actually up this was in Andorra, and in Sierra Nevada on a training camp. And we had focused on, today we wanted to get a better understanding of the insights into the sweat breakdown of athletes during a training, right? So if we followed the process of putting sweat patches on till athletes before, a lot of preparation went into this. I spent a lot of time trying to get this organized, ensuring athletes were buying into it. And then we had a set point on the training ride, for instance, where I was then going to collect the sweat patches off them to then subsequently analyze. But like we know, it's very unpredictable in the real world when it comes to testing. And so at the point where we were stopping was in a really remote, at the top of a mountain, and we had stopped, and there was just a swarm of sort of wild cows everywhere. So I sort of got out to take the sweat patches, and quite funnily, then the cows started going crazy and running, and it was right, guys, this isn't obviously safe, we got to move on. So I think, again, this was really just to highlight how the practicality of the FLOWBIO, in terms of, you're not having to interrupt certain training rides, stop during training rides to collect a bit more data. Obviously, the coach the coaches are quite specific on their training sessions. You want to have minimal interruption till the rider and the session. So obviously, like you've seemed to highlighted, there's a real practicality, I think, from the FLOWBIO, where, as you say, you strap it on your heart rate monitor, which they're more so familiar with, and then they just carry on a training session like normal.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe just to add as well, like something that is, for example, fluid loss, right? A lot of people that I meet, and, everyone tends to be familiar in some way, like, you can weigh yourself in and out. But the practicality and the true value of that, right, that you need to get, and to get it accurate, means that you need to measure in the nude, you need to towel dry. You need to collect your urine, you need to measure how much you're drinking in to actually get those estimates. And it always seems like these errors are, sort of insignificant, but they actually add up really, really rapidly. As you're very well aware, just forgetting to measure how much you've lost in wee, for example, or in non-sweat losses or things like that can be, or just towel drying. I was at that facility at some point this year where they were hopping on those scales, and not towel drying, and it just makes, over 300 ml of difference if you towel dry when you're really sweaty, right? And these things get easily overlooked. And yeah, that's just the reason why, there's this part of this educational thing, of course, from our side, but also just facilitating that you don't need to worry about that. We got you covered. We will take this into account for you, and you can, you don't have to worry about like, oh, where's the dressing room? I need to bring my scales. I need to, for example, at marathons, it's typically impossible to do nude weigh in and outs, right? Let alone track fluid intake, because, you might take a little cup, but, was the cup full every time? Like, did you take electrolytes? Things like that are very difficult to log otherwise. Yeah, and we hope to be of value, of course, in that sense to everyone who does these endurance-based running events.
Yeah, and I think, even just from my experiences, where especially in relation to endurance sports, so primarily I spent a lot of time in World Tour cycling, and I suppose when we look at the Grand Tour, so for instance, the Tour de France, which is potentially one of the most physically demanding events that an athlete can undertake, also coupled with it is undertaken in the middle of July in France. So obviously the temperatures on average for each day, so the Tour de France is raced over 21 stages, where they'll have maybe 1 or 2 rest days spread in between this. So it's really consecutive day-to-day racing at an average of maybe 35 degrees Celsius, and especially with how the world is now, it's getting hotter and hotter year on and year on. So I think previously there was probably a lack of maybe a lack of understanding, but also a lack of application of having a quite bespoke and individualized hydration strategies in place for riders or endurance athletes. And again, I think it went back to just the difficulty and then practicalities of trying to measure body fluid loss, but then also electrolyte insights as well, because obviously if we're looking at pre and post weigh-ins, which, like you highlighted, has been typically done for a number of years, there's also other aspects that will constitute that body mass loss. So obviously it'd be primarily fluid, but you also have glycogen involved in that, and again isn't really taken into account sort of electrolyte content, and that's where we sort of quite seen, just speaking with riders as well, and then visually you could start to see there'd be some guys would have really salty jerseys, and again we didn't have the device or understanding to be like, oh, maybe you're potentially losing more electrolytes than this individual, you're maybe losing more sodium, you seem like a real salty sweater. And then maybe as it's consecutive over day by day, then you could probably start to see quite a negative impact upon their performance. And I suppose also just their ability to recover after these stages, because that's maybe one of the underpinning determinants of performance in a Grand Tour, is the ability to optimally recover after stages. Obviously, there was a big focus upon an understanding in a way of carbohydrate replenishment after endurance exercise, protein to help repair your muscles, but that final part of the puzzle in terms of hydration was probably undermined at certain aspects. And I feel having this type of information is going to be able to really allow people to ensure that they're having reliable and accurate means of informing their rehydration strategy without guessing as well. And even moving onto the aspect of training, where also it'll really help inform your day-to-day fueling and hydration plan. But also I think will be useful now that we typically see with endurance athletes is they'll undertake a lot of heat training as well. So like we know they're trying to acclimate the heat, but they may also be trying to promote certain adaptations associated with heat training. But again, if you're not maybe starting the session appropriately hydrated, managing your hydration within the session, rehydrating after, again, that's going to have a knock-on effect upon your next day training session, but also maybe the adaptation, and also this device may also be able to help understand how an individual endurance athlete is maybe adapting till the heat or acclimating till the heat as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting because I'm not an athlete myself, but obviously see a lot that has been going on and done the tests as well. And some of the heat acclimatization sessions in particular, you put your body under a lot of stress, and it's definitely something that you should be careful with and know what you're doing in a way to be able to do it safely. But also and you touched on this quite well, is sports is a lifestyle, right? And everything you do is pretty much has to be planned out to obtain that optimal performance, and hydration is a bit of a neglected pillar. But if you actually just keep track of what you need to do, like, it becomes a pretty nice way to manage and get that an additional percentage out of your performance. And you also just feel significantly better. Everyone knows you need to enter races hydrated, but you also would like to know, like, how do you actually recover from like a lot of the people will suffer, or how much do you need to prepare when you're not at an event where there's facilities to help you with. What I've seen in particular is that the people, for example, that come through our lab, they will have had and this is the unfortunate way that society sort of works with these things. Like, something has to happen for people to take action on it, right? And that is a bit of the upside down world, because obviously we want to prevent it to begin with, right? So that people never are at risk. So, you don't want people to faint or to be hospitalized because of, the dilution of the sodium in the blood. So, you want to have a system that can help them. But, obviously people tend to look at these devices in a way of like, okay, yeah, now something has happened, now I need it. But you need to change the mindset into like, if you do that, you'll never need it, and you'll be much better at what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah,
is to me super interesting with the heat acclimatization as well, because we monitor continuously, and it sort of like lives on your band. Like, you don't need to think about it. It just gives you that profile as you go along, and as you train throughout the seasons, you will see those changes in sweat rate and your sodium losses, and they will be representative of you getting heat acclimatized, and that's obviously super useful. I want to say as well, and I don't know if you've experienced these cases, but obviously when you have people who are completely unaware of what they're losing, again, when you're especially looking at these long events like in ultra marathon or as you mentioned, the Tour de France, even like this, even if it's just like 200 milliliters or 250 milliliters per hour, that adds up to liters.
Yeah.
And just not knowing that, and knowing that that might have changed, or that you actually are of that sweat rate or that sodium loss, can have severe impact on what's going to happen to you after and for the next day, especially when you're doing these consecutive events like you mentioned with the Tour de France, which is just crazy. You expose your body to such stress for such a long period of time. So
and I think even from my perspective as a nutritionist, it also really helps inform the amount and when to be ensuring that athletes are including certain things like electrolytes within their bidons or within their fluid. So it's maybe of course ensuring they're getting an absolute amount of fluid in, but also just trying to really refine the types of fluids that they're consuming, again, till then ensure that they're replacing certain electrolytes that we know will be are essential for bodily function but are lost in sweat, and may obviously, one example that's always, I suppose, highlighted is around sort of muscle cramping, which is quite frequent, I suppose, in different, all endurance events really. And yeah, we know obviously cramping is quite a complex process, but obviously you're trying to cover all them bases in terms of trying to minimize or eliminate the occasions of cramp. And I think this is another great tool that can be used in a practitioner's toolbox, where they can sort of ensure that the athlete's getting enough fluids, their correct amount and type of electrolytes, which again, from a science and sport perspective, is extremely useful for the athletes that we work with when we're providing our sort of SIS Go hydro tablets, which are electrolyte based tablets as well. So I think it's quite multifunctional in the use of it as well.
Yeah, and maybe just to touch on that point, so how would you envision using our devices? Obviously it provides you with these real-time insights which you didn't have access to before. So what would be your your use case for that?
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest use case for this is just being able to get the bigger consistent picture of actually the analysis of sweat rate of athletes and individuals, in terms of it'll just help inform an ever evolving hydration strategy. Because I think, like we have probably seen with other types of measurements of hydration and fluid and sweat rate, it's maybe only giving you like a snapshot of that real moment in time under that exact condition, under that exact training session, under that exact exercise, nutrition, fluid status. But being able to consistently collect data through all different environmental conditions, different aspects of fluid intakes, different aspects of electrolyte and nutritional intake, can really give you a more complex understanding. And in a way, probably the more data that you have be able to collect from this data, the more accurate and informed sort of fuel and hydration strategy you can put in place. So for me, the biggest benefit and positive, and how I would most notably apply this device, is just sort of consistently through training and competition till then be like, we know when certain temperatures you need to be consuming this amount of fluid, this amount of electrolytes. That's been informed through the data we've previously collected. Whilst on another occasion, you may need to change it to consume this amount of fluid or this amount of electrolytes because the conditions are slightly different. And that's obviously all been informed from the data that's been collected over more longer periods of time through the ease of this device.